Welcome back to the very haphazard recording of the Rhetoric Training for America podcast. Persuasion, political persuasion training, rhetoric warriors, the multi-titled, haphazardly recorded podcast for rhetoricians and those who
Sporadically
love
attended.
us and those who tolerate us. This is again, it's become. I think Dave Payne and I having discussions on little fragments within the MAGA empire and the Trump empire, which I find fun, and hopefully other people find it useful. I think there's a lot of useful information in here. If you like to dig through rhetorical piles, like there's gems somewhere within this. And today we're going to talk about fascism. I think for me, it's been this idea of watching what I said about the first Trump regime when they stormed the Capitol was like, it's interesting that they're using amateurs to storm the Capitol. Like that seems like a flaw in the system. And that's the only thing I didn't see in the first go around was professionalizing kind of the military forces and the police forces and that kind of stuff. And that ties into historically, I think, fascism and violence and the uses of, that particular technique, which they've sort of held back on, I think, in fascism 2.0, like no bodies on the ground. That's sort of been the dictate because that doesn't play well at all on TV. And so that leads us into this idea of historically, what has fascism been? It's a term that's getting bounced around ping pong ball esque in politics right now. Dave Payne's going to talk to us about this, and we're going to
A bit. Well, yeah, I think that's an interesting moment that you cite about the amateur rioters of January 6th. Why weren't they using Trump wasn't in charge of the National Guard then. They ran away. When the National Guard told them to go home, they went home, which means we're not in what Echo called like the fascism, where people are willing to die. It didn't seem like they were anxious to do so. And that may be a distinction to be made. Um, but technically, in terms of history, the January 6th riots were more of a fascist embodiment than the current calling out the National Guard, which is more authoritarian or tyrannical or dictatorial. So I think that's part of the problem with the term. Now, last time we talked, it seems that uncertainty was the term that we're all in this phase of uncertainty. Now, all the pundits are talking fascism. Is Trump a fascist? Or here are the criteria of fascism. So, and fascism is, so now we're certain about something at least, right? So, I think if we really want to find something useful in the term fascist, I think it gets used for the use of military, for the autocratic state, for the dictatorial state. But technically, that happens and is a moment in the evolution of what happens to fascist movements. Fascist movements are technically populist movements.
they're
The people.
banding together of sticks. That's what fascists
That's
mean,
right.
right?
Fasces. That's where the symbol was borrowed by Mussolini, of the group of sticks banded together around an axe from ancient Rome. Right. That we are stronger when banded together. So it really is and the gendering is intentional, a brotherhood movement of strength of the people. So arguably, and the more I read about this, the more I'm sure it's probably right, is that fascism really only occurs in democracies. It is a symptom of and a corollary to. So we have to generate populist movements. We do that every 4 years, right? And that's why every 4 years you can hear in the rhetoric of the campaign some kind of fascist leanings. Right? The brotherhood, the bonding. The people are going to express themselves in taking over the government, and that's kind of a nice little programmatic revolution thing. So I sort of liken it to it is kind of a cancer where the normal growth regulations of cell division go awry somehow
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
and it really depends upon and is corollary to or in dialectic with the social democratic ideal. because the stage one of fascism is really finding what's finding what's wrong with us, what the ills are, the complaints. Democracy is somehow failing us here, and that's why then the final stage of it is devolving into dictatorship, because it really cannot be a system of government. It is not a set of doctrines or principles like socialism or democracy,
It's a
with which
reactivity movement. It's like, yes.
communism, right? So Stalin was a dictator. He was not a fascist. In fact, Stalin said, right, fascism and social democracy are twins. Um, so all the things that we ascribe to, and maybe the problem when we use it that way, or maybe the reason we use it that way so much, is that we really only become aware or worried about fascist movements when they become, right, overtly dictatorial or tyrannical, or you know uh, centrist government, right? They start doing the things that we're seeing happening right now. Okay, so fascists can't really call out the National Guard; only dictators can do that. So, at
Yeah,
least under these
I think that's really
circumstances.
interesting that you pull out like the basis of democracy, especially the democracy of the people versus the oligarchy, or the monarchy and those other models, is a banding together of very small groups of people that can find some type of shared interest in opposing the monarchy and the oligarchy and the dictatorship, right? So it's
The
only in
system's not
that sort of
working. The system's not working as it's supposed to, and
right,
so
and it's
we're
only the
going to
only way to
take the power.
transcend across all those factions and pull them together is to point to the big evil clown on the hill and be like, oh, we got to fight that guy.
Right, right, right. And so once again, and we don't even become aware, or we don't remember historically. Like Rachel Maddow's been doing a good job of sort of looking at these little fascist moments in the past, or after World War I and during the Depression, and even during World War II. And of course, we've had little fascists. I was reminding someone, well, hey, yeah, in the 80s and 90s, remember we had the militia, we had, you know, it's not just happened in the last 10 years or 12 years or whatever. And that's one thing. So really, fascism is not an identifiable thing. It is, you can't just sort of, and that's where academics have gone wrong in trying to categorize it. And so most people looking at it, and I can remember years ago, as a rhetorician looking and going, well, this just isn't a useful term because there's nothing discrete about it. But in trying to, as a categorization of belief systems, it's not that. So it really is, and this is sort of, I'm trying to sell my goods. I'm interested in what does rhetoric have to say about it, or what can say about it, and how useful is it to ask whether we're in fascist territory or not. Um,
Well,
but
in some ways, Trump is a dictator, I mean, a business guy's a dictator. Like he runs the company, he has a little bit of an oligarchic board behind him. And then he's got the stakeholders who are the people, and that sort of system coming over into a political system that, like you said, plays with it always has fascism as as a lurking presence in democracy, because democracy is always about binding together groups, so you've got
right,
enough
right,
power to push something forward. And then Trump is like, oh, I've got enough power to bind together these particular groups, the Christians and the business people and the people who just hate, and I've got a fascist
well, that's how he got
combination.
power. We're
Yeah.
rhetorically binding these people together in their complaints, right?
Well, and even
We are all victims. We are all suffering the ills of a system that is failing us. That is the rhetoric, right? That is the
right.
rhetoric. And if you look back to probably a famous essay about the stages of fascism around 1998, Paxton, those were already identified as the common stages, right? This is not unique in any way, shape, or form here. So Trump is not yet a dictator. He's trying. In other words, he's trying to exercise those kinds of powers and doing what they do. Once again, when it leaves the movement of working in a democracy to gain power, right? That's how you acquire power. You get the people together. It wouldn't work, right?
Right.
It wouldn't work in an authoritarian system where people don't get to vote. or you just crush the uprising, right? So anyway, so now it's into the phase of now we have to govern, and the seams in those groups are starting to show up. They really very often don't have common interests, or if the new regime doesn't serve those groups or serve them equally, then their binding comes unraveled. So, yeah,
Well,
and I think that's also going on.
and I've said this, like the real pain of Trump isn't being felt still, I don't think, by the middle class white population. Like it's all abstract pain. I mean, the idea of picking, I mean, the upside rhetorically of picking a mythic enemy like the illegal immigrant, which is an invisible presence for most people. It's completely overwrought. It's completely over described, and it's not really ever been a problem that I can tell in America for any kind of illegal
It really
alien.
wasn't on anybody's list before they put it
And so
there. Yeah.
that's the rhetorical efficacy of picking that is that you've picked a non-existent enemy, and so it's hard to fight back. There's nobody there to fight back. Like we see some things about like immigrant populations, and we see some imagery of that, kind of fighting back and all that kind of stuff. But none of that is pain being felt by suburban white people, like from Trump
Well,
policies.
I mean, I talk to people. I talk to people in areas with lots of immigrants or illegal immigrants, if they want to find that terminology. Um, and they claim that that this pollution is disrupting their societies, disrupting the law and order. It's that there is crime as a result, and of course you can't sort that rhetoric out from anytime there's competition in the lower classes, right?
Yeah, I
Then
mean that's the nature of
the
the
white
lower
scapegoat the
classes,
other
right?
people, right?
That's the
So
that is
that
the
kind of
ongoing
racism,
cultural nature of that
yeah,
that layer of America is always struggling. It's always fighting, for room. It's always doesn't matter whether it's
sure,
illegal immigration or
sure.
national.
So to some extent, it got talked into existence. Oh, these are bad hombres. Oh, this is crime, and similarly to the Washington D.C. moment here, it's the urban landscape
Right,
itself is
we're
rife
in
with
danger.
crime,
Like, emergency
and everybody goes,
powers.
but hey, we're at a 30-year low. This is getting better. Well, and that is also laced with a racial division. People's. So clearly circulating and amplifying cultural stereotypes to create right the
Well, what
evils.
Mussolini used the communist, right? Like that was the
Well,
boogeyman.
certainly, as did Hitler. I mean,
Yeah,
that the Marxists were really the first people put in prison, and that just happened to dovetail with Jewish people. But originally, the Jewish liberals, the Marxists, were the ones, and those were the ones that Hitler had direct kind of ideological conflicts with as a result of his prison experience. So, but yeah, they were the liberals were what was targeted, and that is a more parallel moment,
right. Well, there's
right? To
not enough
the 40
communists.
year scapegoating of liberals
There's not
and
enough communist
demonizing of
Marxists
liberals.
in America right now to make that a really terrorist group,
Well,
for the suburban
but they've
whites to
so it's
fear.
once again talking your foe into existence. Since Newt Gingrich, so for 45 years, they've succeeded among that group of people, and that's how they win elections. However bad Trump might be, electing a Democrat's going to be worse. A
Right.
liberal
The
Democrat,
elites, all that talk about the intellectual elites and looking down on you. But that's not like it's won elections, but it hasn't sort of coalesced military power and police power to round up, these liberals.
well, that's once again, that's the difference between the rhetorical moment and the governing moment. All right, well, how do you then exercise the power, right? And what happens at that point when when you are the government? Taking over the government and being the government are two different moments, right? So, but just as a kind of an academic footnote, that is all characteristic of fascist rhetoric,
Mhm.
right? The fascist movements have those in common, dating back.
Well, and
Uh,
they start to expand their villain list, right? And that's kind of my point. I don't think they've expanded their villain list. Clearly, liberals are a rhetorical villain, but they haven't expanded their boots on the ground villain list to they're not pulling white people in social media and throwing them into, ICE.
However, gays, transgenders, I mean, if you know, if you,
But yeah, those are small factions that most people can intellectually, and empathetically distance themselves from fairly easily, it seems like. But I'm just
and
curious as to
women,
like what happens if they do call professors out or judges or things like that. Like, what's that going to look like? You
well, they
know,
arrested that student, and yeah, I think that there's an assault on the university. So, you know, that
there's
it
a little bit
hasn't
of
got to
that.
that.
So it's still elitism, right? So
Once again, these are exactly the same institutions, so maybe not the same ethnic groups, but once again, in the administration of power, that ethnic business only gets you into power and is part of the symbolism of banding. Like, how do you band together, right? Find a common enemy. But then in the exercise and administration of power, it is really working to, and Paxton calls it stage four, basically a fascist, that you start to then subvert the institutions that have power. That will be a check on the success of your group, right? Uh, so what has happened traditionally in fascist movements is that when they get into power, they do so being sponsored by mostly the conservative elites. Okay, so the Republicans thought they control this stuff. They played that game with all kinds of fascist rhetoric in the past, right? This rhetoric, "Make America Great Again," is not new, right? It goes back through every basic right Republican campaign. Going back to Reagan at least. And so uh, that's all standard rhetoric stuff. But also the belief that you can use this and harness this populism, and the elites will continue to govern. Okay, so that's the real moment here. Is now in power, breaking down those elites, right? And that has been, a 50-year kind of stalking job by the really the Heritage Foundation and those kinds of people. How do you then start putting people into place and back to the point, the institutions that are being assaulted, ruling elites, intellectual elites, education, um, the courts, those are all the standard places, the standard institutions to subvert, to then solidify power. So that's also pretty much out of the playbook. Just normally we haven't got this far yet.
that's true,
Um,
right? That's what I was saying. Like before, his first regime, he was not able to clean all the people out of the positions of power. There are a lot of still mixed traditional Republicans in positions and institutions of power. Now he could throw, RFK right into the heart of, and you're like, wow, that was fast. I mean, that
sure.
transition from the administrative layer from the first to the second one, like you can't get rid of Hegseth or however you say his name, even though he's clearly incompetent at what he's doing. And they're going and now they're replacing all the military leaders within the honeycomb of that stuff. And I'm like, that's when it's going to get really funky.
Right. Well, it is going on, and of course, these people belong to so many different fringe groups that are, feeding at that trough, and are willing to supplicate Trump. That one wonders whether they will can all get along and function or not, except to maybe kind of the core. And once again, it isn't a core set of beliefs as much as a core set of practices, which get back to restoring the patriarchy, celebrating the mythic past where things were perfect, um, and getting rid of the fringe elements.
All right. So once again, we come to the Dan position. What am I going to ask you?
Oh no. Well, I think it's early, but okay.
It
I
is
mean, I think
early.
there's
I just
more.
want to get in there a
I
little
think
bit
there are more
earlier.
differences. There are differences here, right?
How do we counter
Because
this?
well, I think we got to improve our diagnosis. Once again,
Okay,
fascism
keep
only gets you
diagnosing
so
then.
far.
All right.
Are you fighting fascist government? Are you fighting a tyrannical dictatorship, an authoritarian, or just those kinds of urges? Where are we at in this process? And once again, nothing I have to say or should be construed as we shouldn't be worried about this. There's nothing in these analyses that suggests that there is
Oh, they're
anything to worry about
clearly
because
they're on the luge, like they are going down the speedy ice track.
yeah, um, because at any rate, you don't know. Once again, you don't know whether they're going to succeed or not, and what they're going to mutate into. So even in 1998, when Paxton's looking historically at the fascist groups, he says there's really only one. At stage 5, they either go either radicalization or entropy. They either devolve, as in the case of Mussolini, into pure dictatorship. And look what happened to him, right? They hung him in the gas station. Um, so if your dictatorship fails, right, and the fascist urges are still around, and of course in Italy that can happen. He says Hitler is really the only successful fascist movement where it could export fascism to other places, and I think that's an interesting historical observation. Um, that nobody claims, gee, that's one thing that makes fascism different from other systems of government. Nobody recommends it for someplace else. It is all local. It is all historical of a time and place, and it never completely repeats itself. It's always differently inflected and realized in each culture. So, but I think some things have changed here about that. Right now, we have maybe a half a dozen successful dictatorships worldwide. It does seem to be exporting. These guys do call each other up, right? Which is new and different. And so, Orban coming to give instructions to the Republicans on how to pull this off. I mean, that's just a bit weird, isn't it? So we do have, and Anne Applebaum I've been listening to quite a lot. I think is interesting, a historian. She's really not comfortable with fascism. She talks about autocracy a lot, but she really calls these kleptocracies. And so, what are we really dealing with here? I guess is the prelude question to,
Yeah,
what's to be done about
it's not your daddy's fascism.
it. Right, right. Um, so at what point do people get aware that they're just being swindled for oodles of money? I mean, that seems to be what all of these groups are about right now, that they're in cahoots with each other. It is, and once again, this one's instead of necessarily evolving into uh, a dictatorship that has an ideology about how to live. Now, we might say the Christian right, the Heritage Foundation guys, which are basically a third of the coalition. So I want to identify what are the coalitions that support them, and that's the one that probably is worrisome in terms of having the kind of traction, kind of the handmaiden's tale uh, outcome. It could turn into a ruling dictatorship, right? If all these other ones fail, and they probably will. So that's one group. There is the kind of just the middle of the road, disenfranchised Republican MAGA who just wants to give a finger to the democracy, to the system that produced all this weak leadership and left them behind. And they're probably not, that co-optable. And this kind of apocalyptic cult of techno, you know, uh, and it seems to me they have very little to do with the other groups, except maybe rich business people. But they also seem to be most in tune with kind of oligarchy and totalitarian, technological centers that would rule things. Elites, they're elite. So at any rate, the kind of people that J.D. Vance goes and talks to.
Right.
So right. So he's kind of straddling that
What
versus
a
the Christian
what a
nationalists, I guess,
I
at this
would not
point.
go. I would not go to this party. Like that is not a good. The Christian nationalists hanging with the maggots, hanging with the apocalyptics. That is not a
Yeah.
party I'm attending. I don't think that's going to be any fun at all.
Well, at any rate, but Trump seems mostly just a kleptocrat, right?
Yeah.
And kind of wanting an oligarchy to evolve out of this, and that seems to be what has happened in these current fascist takeovers in these other countries, right? Um, they're just basically stacking up trillions of dollars, robbing the public coffers, and so at some point, all of these groups that fueled the fascist uh, movement are going to be unhappy about that. I think, but
So I mean, if you think about it, the evolution of that, you had like the Marcos, the Imelda Marcos, and that kind of stuff, which were basically dictator kleptocrats in these sort of underdeveloped countries. But how you take over a developed country is the oligarchs have to become kleptocratic, right? Like it has to have a professionalism to it, and that seems to
Well,
be
Russia. I mean,
the
this is
difference.
right.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's, people have made that argument about where I heard this. Don't remember where I heard this for the first time, but when the reason that the Soviet Union disbanded and allowed the wall come down wasn't it was so they could export oligarchy to the rest of the world. Like the oligarchs had been hemmed in, and demonized because of the inheritances of communism. They're like, we need to get rid of this so that we can branch out. So it was basically a franchising moment when the wall came
Well,
down.
whether that was the intention or not, that certainly was the effect. But once again, if you go back and look at historically what's happening, I think there's a case to be made that I don't know. I'm not a Russian expert, but it seemed to me that it's a case of where the current coalition, the system of government that was binding them together and keeping the integrity and unity of these different ethnic groups and regionalities alive, it just simply broke down, right? With our help. So what happens when the normal social structures and institutions dissipate. And in Russia, of course, we went from a feudal society to a modern bureaucratic state in a period of 35 years. So there were never democratic institutions to get in their way.
That's true.
It's not a good example of anything, but except that, yeah, when you lose, when these infections, these oligarchs are opportunistic, if nothing else,
Yeah,
because
right. No, you
there's still are
smash the
resources there.
tumor, they metastasized into the rest of the world.
But what you have is a serfdom population who's not used to governing anything, and so right, that's easy. There's no expectation that they didn't get there by saying, "Oh, we're empowered." I guess to some extent the communists, but probably that was never.
So I'm curious to what you think then of Newsom. So Newsom seems in the last couple of weeks, with the redistricting thing, Newsom's very traditional in a lot of his rhetoric, very coalition, rainbow coalition in his rhetoric has been, California forever. But has now stepped up into the role of premier Navalny kind of, standing in front of the tank. I'm going to fight back. I'm going to bring the
Well, I wonder
forces of
what you, as a
democracy.
comic, think of. I mean, his satire stuff is lovely, right? Have you seen the
Yeah, I
kind of
mean,
the
it's been
parodies
sitting
of
there forever.
Trump's?
How often have I said, even on this podcast, hire some good comedians to fight back with Trump? And that's all they're doing is it's not even great comedy, but at least it's in the idiom. It's fine.
Well, the bleeding air with the bottle of ketchup, and I mean,
Yeah,
it's
it's all sitting there to lampoon Trump, in politics, not from the comedy world, but import it actually into the politics and see what
I,
happens.
I suppose there's a kind of a dialectical necessity here that the guy's got to become an emperor before you can say, "Hey, you don't have any clothes on," right? Uh, so these things kind of come together as the apotheosis of Trump becomes more firm that he can be lampooned. But at any rate, that is a component of the Newsom campaign that I thought we might ought to at least acknowledge.
Yeah, I think, he's going to have to. There's a lot of things going on with that. When you look at, again, anti-fascism. So he's kind of building, the white guy monomyth of I'm coming after Trump, and you're starting to see a little bit of people rising up around it and going, oh, there's a guy actually showing power to power, and how much power he has, we will see. But that's the one thing that hasn't worked against Trump. Nobody has been able to really throw power at him, especially since he corrupted the Supreme Court and there's no check at all. Like, how do you use power against a guy who's getting closer and closer to unlimited power? Is it still an option? And that's what I'm interested in to see if Newsom can step up there and become the white knight, in shining garb. And
Well, okay, article this morning out there in the internet ether, but you've heard this talk being made even from Trump phase one, the administration one, you've heard this talk kind of being made. What Democrats need to do is to start their own MAGA-like movement, which means they need right the leader that embodies the democratic spirit, right? The brotherhood. You need uh, that kind of passion. Okay, remember when, in the very first, well, Bernie would have won because he was able to generate the passion, even though he was to the far left, right? We still haven't resolved that tension within the Democrat. So once again, the Democrat is a sort of a democracy, and the Democratic Party is a democracy in failure by itself, where people are saying, "Gee, we need this kind of internal takeover to empower it to counter the other MAGA." And maybe rhetorically that's right. I don't. How would I know? But that's certainly going to be, I think, a solution because of the. And this is something else to talk about, the lack of popularity of the Democratic Party right now. And what does that mean? I mean, that's something that you hear repeated day in, day out, that people simply are not, they may not like Trump, they may not like the stuff that he's doing, but they do not see the Democratic
No, they
Party.
seemed pretty popular when they thought they're going to win with Kamala Harris, and I think it's a loser rebound, to tell you the truth. Suddenly they lost, and now they're unpopular. Everybody before the election is like, "Oh, this momentum," and you could feel the democracy again. And it didn't seem to me that the brand was all that dead. I just think Americans have a real hard time with people who lose.
Well, there is that. I think the face of the Democratic Party that got showed there in terms of the stumbling through the Biden experience and the quasi nomination of Harris and the failure. I think yes, absolutely. I think all of that, but laced with these are the two. Harris and Clinton were the two lowest turnout elections in modern history, and there's once again back to the patriarchy and uh, the misogyny, not to mention the racism, which I think is one thing that makes this fascist thing very different. I think that's all in play in terms of numbers of who goes to the polls, who doesn't, and what do they do there. So I think all of that was in play. And so you're right. What does it mean? I think the other thing that, as I parse this out about the low numbers on the Democratic Party, is that parties themselves, the Republican Party is not a party, it is a MAGA movement. And it really is the zombie corpse of the old Republican Party, reoccupied by MAGA people, right? So parties themselves, with the rise of independence, right? Uh, so it's not going to be able. Nobody's going to say, "Yeah, I like the party," and if it weren't for the MAGA Trump, nobody would say they like Republicans either, right?
Right.
So I think we're just simply asking the wrong question in the wrong political environment about. I think we're misreading it. So maybe that does bespeak that we need some other kind of systemic organizing rhetorical movement that is not going to just depend on party loyalty, because I don't think you can. I don't think you can win with just party loyalty. Clearly, we've demonstrated that 3 times now. You've got to have something else, maybe 4 times. So I don't think Hillary didn't win with it. The first time around when she opposed to Barack Obama. Obama had that something extra besides just being a Democrat. So,
Yeah, it's called a penis.
well, I think the black community certainly got out behind him in a way that they apparently did
Yeah,
not.
you gotta have a really, really solid block of voters that aren't going to go away, and that again I think is the Trump advantage. Like who else are the crazy racists and things are going to vote for? Nobody. Like there's nobody else that's on the national scene that's sort of throwing that stuff around with any type of, other than the governors and the senators, and like and the Congress, they get elected with that stuff. But on the national, there was Laura Loomer, one of the crazy influencers around Trump, was even saying a couple weeks ago, "Hey, when Trump's gone, the movement's gone. Nobody else has this kind of, charisma and ability with the media and things like that. There's nobody in that group that's going to be able to step up and take the mantle. They'll try, but watch J.D. Vance try to, bond with the ragged refuge of America, and yeah, it's not going to be pretty.
Well, once again, that's why of the three and there may be more to be identified. There are the hardcore Proud Boy kind of militia-like fascist movements, right? That say, yeah, we're fascist. And then there's the Christian right, which dovetails with that a little bit, at least rhetorically. The sort of the Heritage Foundation, uh, Handmaiden's Tale kind of vision of restoring the past, where right.
Oof.
Also patriarchal, also
Yeah,
misogynistic, also
sure.
racist. Sharing that those values. Then there's the techno fascists, right? Then there's and kind of the middle of the road Republican independent voters that, for whatever set of reasons, can't stomach what Democrats have been serving them. Whether they will in the future or not, it's another question. So yeah, uh, of those three, which one could, multiple choice question, which one could actually emerge a victor here? And I guess it is the well organized machine of the church, the Christian coalition that most concerns me. But
It's all this sort of um, gong that just says, "Come over here and hate somebody." You know, it doesn't matter who. We'll let you hate. You can hate women. You can hate a race. You can hate the elite. It's fine. Come on over, and that is not a problem over here. In fact, it's part of the culture. And I
seems to
see
be a requirement now. Yeah.
and I see that again. It's sort of an emotional fascism. It's not an intellectual fascism around issues. It's just an emotional binding that, hey, we understand why you might feel really upset about the world and outraged and hate. There's a group over here that you can take those feelings and dump it on, and we will shit on that group as hard as you want us to do, and you'll feel better. And so, to me, like the emotional side of that stuff and just watching it being directed around is very interesting.
Well, yeah, I think that really is the heart of fascism is the generation of feeling, um, uh, and I'm not the first to say that by any means, that because it isn't an intellectual set of beliefs. It really is this frustration, sense of failure, abandonment, personal alienation. That I don't have a vehicle for my success, so this movement is a vehicle for my success.
Well, and those are
Um,
all modernity feelings too, right? That's baked
sure.
into modernity culture, alienation and distancing and lack of ability to get to where it feels like
Well,
success and
it is the
meaningful.
politicization of that, tapping that
Mhm.
rhetorically for political power, basically,
Yeah,
and despots will ride that power. Um, and if they succeed, then they get power, and then they have to become some other kind of something else. Um,
yeah. There's
it's
nowhere to go with it once you ride that dark surfboard, to the top of the wave. You're just sitting there going, well, now how do
yeah,
I?
yeah. It's just at this moment. I think the red flag has to go up. Don't feel safe as a result of thinking, this can't outlast Trump. Because what cures us of
Yeah.
Trump may be worse, right?
No, that's why I said like it was somebody in his camp that said that. I don't think anybody's sitting back going, well, this is all. It is in some ways, I think, accelerated by Trump. Trump's a singular talent that didn't exist anywhere else because he had deep media training. He was already culturally known. He has, training in being a
He could
villain, an
best embody he
anti-villain.
could have best embody the fascist need for that uh, that leader that can embody the spirit of the brotherhood here. And that seemed to most of us go, what, really? This kind, but if you start, he is an outlaw. He is just, he is more like the core of that movement. Um, he seems unlikely as a Christian leader. He seems unlikely. All of that is still making heads spin.
Yeah, but I
Uh,
mean, just
but
just the
he is
fact
the
that he's
outsider. He is the outsider that can do battle with the rich people.
right, and he's a singular leader, so it still plays into the Jesus myth and the God myth and all that stuff. It's so still a guy at
Yeah.
the core of it. They've already been trained to believe in fantasticalism and faith and non-logic, so it's fine. They're like, oh yeah, well, it doesn't quite cohere that he acts like this, but he's also this. but they're fine with pseudo logic, so they
Once
don't
again,
care.
there's only maybe a third of the people that really can bond to that symbolism. Um, the rest are part of the coalition that can ride that power, right? Um, until he gets rid of them or something else, or their
Yeah, until
interests
he
are no
needs more
longer served.
sacrificial lambs, it doesn't.
So
I,
when they quit being part of the kleptocracy, when they quit getting empowered as a result, then
when you saw a
so
little bit of
I
that
don't know.
with the Elon Musk, fracture, right? You saw a little bit of an oligarch getting a little too much power, and Trump going, "Oh no, 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 no! I can't have like a co-person in the media. Like you have to keep him down here. I'm the guy who gets all the media attention." And that's the only reason why Trump got upset with him. It wasn't that he was taking too much money or anything else. He was getting too much
Well, but
attention.
Musk got upset with Trump about, oh, wait a minute, my job here was to reduce the federal deficit. You were going to really reduce the spending, and you doubled it. I think
Yeah, no,
that was the issue.
right, but that's Trump's whole thing.
He
It's like
started criticizing Trump.
he's just an attention person, and the actual policies and even the money and stuff, like he doesn't understand any of that stuff. So he's like, "Look, I'm just getting attention here, and you're in my attention space. I don't care what you don't like. You got to go." And so, I mean, I think there was a moment there where people were like, "Oh, is there going to be like a little civil war within like you're talking about the coalitions?" I call it the MAGA pie. Like there's a pie of all these little slices, and there's the big ones, and then there's all these little things over here. And the first thing I do when I break this apart for people is like, well, which slice of the pie are you talking to? If you're trying to counter and bring some of those people back, like it's very different going after Christian nationalists and trying to bring them back to democracy than it is technocrats and bring them back. So you have to slice the pie correctly. But you saw just a little bit of civil war within the MAGA, stuff within the right with Musk versus Trump, and it didn't last long. Same way, like Putin, put a bomb on his general's plane as he's flying around. Like any kind of resistance gets taken out pretty quickly. Trump isn't at the point yet where he has to kill
That's effective
anybody,
authoritarian dictator. Yes.
right? Well, Trump doesn't have to kill anybody yet. He can just fire them. Like he hasn't had to move to murder.
I, I
Putin,
like I like the idea of firing as a symbolic form of assassination.
it's
Yeah.
totally what it is. It's a complete assassination, and that's what I said in Authoritarian 2.0. They don't have to kill people. They just,
Well, that's right out of The Apprentice. Yeah. So
yeah, take them out of the system, and that's why all the senators and all the everybody in Congress knows, like if they say anything, they'll just be removed. So you know it's a form of murder.
well, back to the central question though of what survives here. I do think that the fascist origins of MAGAism and Trumpism probably will dissipate. I don't think they will mutate into right. Not
We're not
without
going full Orban. We're not going full kleptocracy, authoritarian.
right because too much of the coalition is just about greed, and when that fails, you know. Now, what will it be replaced with, and what uh, will we return to anything like the democratic structure that we had is another question altogether. And it depends on a couple of things. One is how big are our problems? How, you know, we're economic and climate change, and we have a lot of unsolved
If you have a
problems.
depression, suddenly you're much more into socialism.
Right, exactly. But I wonder, studying, going back and reading about the history of fascism and stuff, of how many people in America saw Roosevelt being elected 4 terms and merging with the government, using the government to stimulate business. How many of them saw that as a brand of right? He was hated by a good chunk of the. He was the problem to many people. So, and then that of course got all interfered with by total war, which is yet an option on the table. Yet an option on the table.
It's China's burbling around Taiwan and stuff. Like I would not be at all surprised for that to break out before the end of the Trump regime.
So one thing is, are we successful enough? Is there a line here that will defend the democratic state in terms of will we have a decent election? So we're nibbling away at that. If we have a decent election, things can go on more or less as before with stalemate and getting enough. Ann Applebaum made the point, but when they got to that moment in the conversation of, well, how do we fix this? This was with Scott Galloway. I was noticing his pod, but and she's really a very informed person. She said, well, the easiest way to fix this would be what you need. You need 3 senators and 7 congressmen to simply say we've had enough, and within the confines of the current right, Congress can stop him from doing the things. Congress can stop him from uh,
Maybe,
using the National Guard. Congress could stop him from
maybe.
gerrymandering. Yeah, maybe. Well, once again, that would be the easiest fix if we could see that happen. It would be nice to test that. Then the second way would be in the next election, okay, the people be sufficiently fed up to hand the government back to the Democrats or something like that uh, to get the Republicans who are loyalists currently out of control. If we can use still right exercise of democratic power. So I think that's what's on the table at the moment. Yeah,
Well,
it's getting to
that's,
that.
Trump met with Putin this week and immediately went after the elections, right? Next day, like mail-in voting, electronic, it's all corrupt. Like instantly was after, right at the elections.
You think Putin whispered this into his ear that
I think Putin has been his mentor with a lot of this stuff for
whispering?
all along. It's like, hey, I
There was
think we
that
can
moment
take
sometime back
America.
where Putin said, "Well, just throw him in jail for 10 years. That'll straighten him out." And
Well,
Trump said, "Well, hey, can we do that?"
again, they're nibbling around all that stuff, and America doesn't have a lot of experience with it. And one of the things I was saying is that America saw fascism across the waters, right? We saw it over there. We saw Hitler over there. We saw that stuff over there. It's never been circulating around here, that type of intensity. That
Well,
you know,
or when it's your own, you don't see it that way. When it's your own, you see it as a populist movement,
yeah, it's less.
And
I think
once again,
it's
we don't recognize it as fascist until it gets to that Mussolini Hitler kind of stage, right?
bodies on the ground. That's what I'm saying. Like it's not until you have a lot of video of people being carried out of Kent State and things like that where you're like, oh man, this is these guys are seriously dangerous. Right now, they're just firing people.
Right, right.
Like the guy, Vendeman, who originally reported on
All
Trump,
right.
you know, and Ukraine, and he just fired him, and so he's gone. It's like, well, that's a symbolic killing, and he's taken out of the system of power. Now he's re-entered by becoming a congressman.
Well, some U.S. citizens that get sent off to one of these concentration camps. I mean, and
What color are those citizens? Again, I think the
well, that's
suburban
that's
white people
problematic.
can't
That's
think outside
problematic.
the abstraction of American versus white American. I'm not sure people react well to, oh, smaller population American is being, systematically violently treated versus people down the street, the Millers. We don't seem to be very good at making that, move.
Well, there's no doubt that that's under that cloak is why it's get passing uh, under the radar as much as it is. That's for sure. Um, and once again, 4 dead in Ohio. I mean, they start killing some kids, or right.
Only four. Four. They
Well,
did a lot. Those four did a
those
lot
were
of work.
simpler times. Those were simpler
It was
times.
a lot of work those four did rhetorically.
Yeah, if you're exporting, or arresting Palestinian foreign students, that's a whole different.
Right, but they didn't have to even say four white kids dead in Ohio, but that was essentially the power of that symbology. And the question again to me
But
is like, what when you're going to fight back against modern fascism, some of the tools that we've had in the past, like showing bodies on the ground and the horror of this stuff, don't seem to be working. Like they're not giving that kind of fodder to fight them back with right now. They understand the difference. They're being a lot more sophisticated in what they're doing to America.
back to what's different about now than 25 years ago or 50 years ago or 75 years ago. Um, One is our social organization through technology, through technical media, right? Social media. That's different. That
Yeah.
we are all more, and you and I have, crossed that bridge a couple of times in our conversations. We get to well, yeah, the stream of disinformation, the stream of confusion, the significant portion of the population who doesn't even know what's real, and the degree of the population that is so frustrated by that they don't even try to figure out what's real. So even if you're a member of one of these groups that might be disenfranchised, keeping track of the politics, being active in politics requires that much effort. Because and confusion is serving them, creating that kind of confusion. Furthermore, just sort of the atomization of how do you band the sticks together when you can't get the sticks in the same place?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, and somebody's coming along with, a machete constantly cutting your sticks apart again. A rhetorical machete to be like, no, no, you guys really don't like each other. You really aren't that much bonded
We
together.
can't break as long as we can break the sticks individually, we can rule. And
I
that's
don't even
kind of
think
what's
it's
going
breaking
on.
the sticks, it's breaking the binding, right? So it's like, hey, these people are not Americans. They're illegal immigrants. And people are like, well, isn't everybody an American illegal immigrant? Like, did we
So
come
so
here
once again,
legally from England?
this fascism has cropped up in the weaknesses of the democratic system, uh, and its weaknesses are, both the hugeness of the problems that we face, our inability to agree, our urban rural and divides, our technological religious divides. All of those divisions are operating against recreating unity. And this comes through, says, well, we can generate it, it's generating the symbolism of that. And if you do it for 37%, apparently that's enough, as long as somebody else out there can't get 40 together. So that is one of the components that is threatening to us, I think, in terms of the recovery phase. Secondly, just the sheer abject racism that undergirds so much of the division that is being exploited here, between the political parties, between uh, that you know uh, invading LA with people waving Mexican flags, invading Washington D.C., and all the cultural stereotypes that attend to it. Um,
We're going into,
though,
yeah, we're going into minority population areas.
Yeah, and I'm not the first person to observe this by any means. That the belief that this is such a crime infestation that we've got to take it over by martial law. That's not Boston. It's not Minneapolis. Is it a good practice for that? We'll see. So once again, the sheer racism of this moment, and uh, and the alignment of people politically can't be underestimated as a significant difference, with modern America, current America, than other previous examples. So history doesn't save us from this moment in the least.
It doesn't. And I make this argument a lot that as we're experimenting around, they've experimented around and found new anti-democratic rhetorics. Like we need to experiment around, and this is one of the reasons at least I like what Newsom is doing, even with the comedy, experiment around and find new, powerful democratic rhetorics. Because the civil rights rhetoric, which has driven the Democratic Party for so long, seems to have tapped out. Like it got shoved farther and farther down into farther and smaller splinter groups. It's not women's rights and black rights. It's now like all these splinter groups, the fascism, the binder has like gotten stretched so much that the civil rights rhetoric, I'm not sure, is strong enough to win against what's popped up on the other side of the kind of hate infested rhetoric
Yeah.
of the GOP.
Right. Well, sort of the reaction to the reverse racism kind of binder, I guess, is about as
Well, yeah,
you know,
right. They've got their own race rhetoric.
two, 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 two things. Two things: the patriarchy slash misogyny, restore male rule, and that's bigger than I think it's getting notice.
well,
I
you've
mean,
seen it
that
all
is
in
the
like the
one
bro
that is the
culture.
one thing that every fascist movement has held in common.
Yeah.
If there's one common theme. So let's go back to the time when men ruled this,
Right. So it's a gender rhetoric.
as much as anything,
Yeah.
but also order, right? Who's in charge and control and all of that. Um, so whether that's a subdivision of gender or gender is a subdivision, who knows? But that, and then the racial part, and to embrace race, to embrace the social democratic ideal and the inclusive one, that's feminine in a sense compared to, uh,
Sure.
and that's people really want strength, and they because they're fearful, they think strength is the only, and that is the only rhetoric of strength that we have right now, right? There we
And
you know,
Gavin Newsom
how many
stepping up and yeah.
other cultures have had female presidents and prime ministers and leaders, because you could be a strong female in those cultures. We simply do not have. I mean, look at the females that we're treated with. You've got to have, this sort of Barbie hairdo, I guess, to get a position, and
Over there,
be
you're starting to
under
see like
40 or so.
I'm sitting miles away from Texas legislature right now, where
Yeah,
the Democratic rep, black woman, refused to go home because they were making her sign a permission slip and have a police escort, and so she's been
right.
down in the courthouse, like in Texas Congress, just sitting there, and won't leave, and they've got her locked in, and but you're starting to see like where the parts of the American culture where there are strong females like black culture, you know, they are allowed to at least inhabit that. And then Trump comes in to attack them, and sort of the way he always
Well,
does, to suggest,
then you flip the race switch, and then you flip the liberal switch, and
right.
then you got
Yeah.
all you got it all lined up.
You can
So
take them down in a lot of different
I don't know
ways.
whether we can overcome those things in any short order. It's fast enough to uh, save the climate.
There's an interesting power about it, though, like Jasmine Crockett and the kind of highly verbal, sort of rhetorical heroes, like that, who stand up and have interesting attacks and heckles and takedowns of Trump. And maybe it's just me because I like verbal people so much, but I instantly was like, yeah, I'd vote for her. You know,
Sure,
I was
sure,
never like that about Hillary. Hillary was never deft, verbally deft like that. She was publicly clumsy. I think she was plenty smart. I voted for Hillary. Like, I'm like, oh, yeah, put a smart person
sure.
in there and I'm fine. But like, this new, it's a superpower, that sort of hyperverbal, female, the Ann Richards, sort of,
Yeah, think about her a lot. Think about her a lot.
glided in there and it's like, they're like, this chick is sassy, and people in Texas were like, I'll vote for that. I'll vote for sassy. So I don't know. That's an interesting rhetorical hero. Um, Newsom isn't. He's a little clumsy. Like, there's something about his speech patterns where he's really good, and then when he's trying to like be performative or something, he kind of like loses the lingo. So I'm a little worried about him having that type of verbal facility. But I've seen him do really well too. Like when I was in California.
I think he's very smart, and I think he is very deft verbally, but he's being cool at the same time.
Well, and he's trying to be dumb. That's part of the problem. Like for people that are smart, like trying to dumb down while you're talking is hard, and
Yeah,
he's completely smart
it's
enough to do
true.
it. I've heard him very much go off on things intellectually. I'm like, oh, he understands what's happening here.
Yeah.
But Trump had no problem at all going dumb. Like he was very good at moving down that pipe,
Well,
you know,
no, that
super.
was no effort. That was a short putt. Absolutely.
Well, he knew from his promoter days in tech and and entertainment that you just got to keep it simple. Simple villains,
Well,
simple heroes.
and just repeat what other people, what
Yeah,
anyone should do.
he's been given script, that's simple, but
Well, I mean, these are not. There's just so little that's original in all of these things. It's just sort of a default bank of stuff that the conspiracy stuff and the kind of easy analysis and who's to blame.
you're
Uh,
even seeing that with the Democrats stretching to try to describe Trump. The idea that he wants to be a king or a dictator or authoritarian. That terminology doesn't really exist like that in America anymore. We've never had a dictator. We've never had a king. So it's, again, it sounds European. It sounds like the past. It's maybe not
And
strong
fascism,
enough.
he gets defended from fascism with the same
Yeah.
kind of.
To me, I've described him before, like he's just a horrible boss. Like almost everybody's had a boss
Bad
like
boss.
Trump, who just makes everybody's life hell, makes horrible decisions, and if he would just get out of the way, you could run the company.
Well, there is that. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how. I mean, it's just people's ability to live in denial and to select facts, I guess. I don't know. Uh, that they'll, that's just a measure of their desperation, I suppose, is how you can bend him as a shapeshifter into that kind of rhetorical hero. I mean, yeah, bad boss, bad leader, bad CEO, bad businessman. I
Just bad
mean,
at this,
the evidence is all there, but that doesn't seem to matter because he's speaking, he's channeling the inner truth. That's right. What they believe to be common sense and obvious, and that is this sort of traditionalist, grassroots, salt of the earth. And it doesn't matter that he's never been those things. It doesn't
yeah, it
have
doesn't
any
matter at all.
clue.
There's no connection to the evidence down here. It's all story.
And part of that is a symptom of television having occurred on a TV screen for most, of politics being a political show for most people. That's where it all takes place. We
I,
know
I
these
don't
are
know.
actors playing these parts. We don't care.
I don't know if you've seen Mark Maron's new special. I'm a half fan of Maron. I very much like the work
I
that he's
like it a
done,
lot.
but
Yeah.
that his comedy doesn't always grab me, but he always has some lines in there and some insights. And one of them is about when he spends some time going after his own liberal people, and he says, we got to deal with our buzzkill problem. Like liberals they just kill the buzz in the room, the vibe. It's like somebody just told a joke and you're like, well, what about the Guatemalan? And I'm like, God, can't we just do a joke? And part of that too, it's like all that cultural fray that they've gotten to see. I still see that very commonly cited as why they like Trump, that he just doesn't force them into this more complicated social, ecology. It's like keep the social ecology clean and simple, and I'm much happier.
Yeah, dare to be somewhat offensive, yeah, and not be immune to being corrected, right? So, political correctness involves people getting corrected a lot,
Right. I don't know.
and that is kind of that buzzkill moment, right? I've had a few experiences like that recently.
Well, tell me your final thoughts on fascism here. Like, what do we do? What's the trajectory here?
Well, our political institutions require populism. Our democratic, we certainly need to work on uh, updating our consciousness about the modern communication media component of this, people's sophistication and how that limits and interfaces with that, I suppose. Calling on mass education is nice, but it's a long project that we seem I keep saying I fought ignorance my whole life and I've lost. So,
Badly. Yes.
so I don't know.
I don't know.
So all of that.
You de-ignoranted me. Like I
Well,
remember lots of moments when you said something like, I've never thought about that before.
anyway, uh, certainly in the short run, you've got to build a coalition and once again take charge of the political processes. I think once again that can only grow and prosper in complete dissipation of the strength. I think Americans believe themselves to be hard to dominate, hard to, and that's part of what the MAGA expression is. Oh, this new kind of Europeanized, intellectualized. I think there is still huge distrust to elites. David Brooks, although I'm not a big fan, has lately he's kind of a conservative but intelligent New York Times contributor, talking about the meritocracy, and of course that part of that has to do with educational systems, which education is, I think very much one of the major institutions on the line right now. And moving, all the way up K through 12, the kind of stuff that's being annexed by ideology. But his recent thing on meritocracy and sort of the disaffection of the American public with the meritocracy. I see that as relevant because I think that's a big part of in my uh, uh, I'm blanking on his last name right now. The What's the Matter with Kansas guy? He's great, but Thomas, you know, uh, his critique of what's happened with liberalism and the Democratic Party that has been governed by these educated elites. And so this idea that the meritocracy is in a way part of what's being reacted against by the middle class, by the MAGAs, by N plus, so that and that gets back. I think that one of the faces of that is the liberal smugness. We just want to be right, and
Um,
so
uh,
I think somehow uh, that's got to be. In other words, for complete political enfranchisement and restoration of the progressives, that's
well,
got
I
to be
think
dealt
it's
with.
sitting there as a pinata for the right to hit. But as somebody who grew up in Kentucky and was surrounded by seething ignorance, and didn't like it, and sort of fought my way through it and out of it as best I could, like it doesn't seem smug to me. Like I have a lot of, I know a lot of people who are still swimming around in the ignorant waters who are like, "How dare you?" You know, I'm like, "Well, how dare you stay there?" Like, doesn't
Well,
it bother you to be ignorant?
whether it's a real problem or a rhetoric or a PR problem, I don't know. But and I'm guilty too. I'm guilty too. Absolutely, because we are, and we have succeeded through those
Yeah,
elites. The
yeah, totally.
meritocracy system was the only thing that allowed me as a lower middle class kid to be where to have my career and do what I do. Um,
Yeah, it's nuts.
so
I'm one generation off tobacco fields. What in Kentucky tobacco fields? Literally.
I get
My
it.
dad has
I get
pictures
it.
of him. I have pictures of my dad when he was
Well,
a kid
you might look
standing
at
in,
Brooks's essay because he's
yeah.
saying that that system has itself sort of been corrupted. It worked really well for us, but maybe not working so well right now. It's at least a good question to raise.
Yeah,
But
yeah, it is. I I just always
I
look
do
at it
think
and think,
I do think if you want to ask why the sociology of the original MAGA movement felt the way it did about experts, about educated elites, about Democrats, um, about I think there's a lot of answers in there as to the feeling that generated that. Now, whether it's legitimate or not, but once again, just sort of saying, "Oh, you're stupid and you're wrong," hasn't been a winning strategy.
well, right. And I like this was funny. My son Zeke told me, he goes, my buddy Jake, who's his workout buddy, said he listened to your podcast, like just out of the blue. And I'm like, really? What do you say? He goes, your dad likes to use a lot of big words.
Oh yeah, nice.
And I'm like, you mean accurate words? You mean like words that actually accurately describe what's going on in the situation? Like, but that the idea that the vocabulary is something that they can be jarred by, like it's
See, I
again,
see you
it's
as a man of the people. Yeah.
right. These are not like I'm as least academic probably as they come, but like the idea that the things that they can easily react to, like the surface things, they look different, they sound different, they talk different, and that's enough to again coalesce, create a coalition of hate or resistance to that thing. When I see it as like when I hear people talking above me or know more than I do, I'm attracted to that. I'm like, I get well, great, this is an opportunity to learn something, but we got to get back to like, and I do a lot of that in the
You also have a PhD and learn to put pride and identity in that.
and I'm not, yeah, I'm not against that at all, but I'm solidly understanding of where I come from. And I still talk to that population all the time. That's why I don't mind going on right wing podcasts. And just
Yeah.
before we talked, I talked to a woman who's gotten sucked up into the Libertarian Party, here in Austin. And she was in the paleo movement. So she's always been kind of moved into alternative movements. Like that's been her thing. But now she's spouting off a ton of, right wing propaganda, and I'm like, I need to slow you down. I need to sort of, and I'm going to maybe do a class for her organization about what happens when you absorb unethical persuasion. Doesn't matter where it comes from, what it does to you, and then you end up becoming a spokesperson for that. But I don't feel antagonistic or hateful towards those groups. I feel like it's just somebody who's not been defended. They didn't learn how to defend their brain. They didn't learn what these techniques do. And I was lucky enough that I did. And so I still have that sort of maybe egalitarian feeling of giving back to the working class community and that kind of stuff. Where
Absolutely,
you know,
absolutely.
so that makes if that makes us elitist, well, I don't know what to do. Like,
Well, no,
yeah,
take back unions. Absolutely, take back right. Once again, but let's figure out where the democratic unity really did exist, and how do you restore it? Right? How do you fix it rhetorically and celebrate it rhetorically? Would be at least one of the pages in the book.
yeah, and I think even when you look at how you re-deify democracy, it was deified forever within America, and now like somehow it's been, I guess we've ignored it for so long. People don't really, they just see it as civics class or something. I'm like, no, we've got to deify democracy. Like you can't let the kleptocrats take that much of it and expect it to still function. Like, and when it goes away, man, like, Athens lost democracy in what, 322 BC, and then it didn't really appear again in the world until 1776. That's 2,000 years of dead democracy. So don't,
Sure. Well, we look at where democracies seem to be succeeding, and they're great examples. But once again, the sort of the uh, American exceptionalism and anti, European, we're the real thing, always gets in the way of asking. But if this idea that we need to compete with places like China, or we need, wait a minute, really? That you mean we need a huge population of people that don't earn, enough money, so we got to compete with them in manufacturing? Is that,
yeah. It's a
our
weird
other
world
third?
trying to keep a democracy going amongst all this, these other systems. Same way it was always weird for a communism to try to survive amongst capitalisms, right? So
And once again, in that fundamentally is contradictory to the idea of getting rid of all the immigrants who are the ones here willing to work for to be the underclass and do the working, um, that help you to do that. And a lot of Republicans really seem to understand that.
well, and that may be one of the things, one of the avenues into a really nice criticism of what's happening that people would understand that you're destroying capitalism. It's not democracy, like you're destroying capitalism. And when they start to feel that, maybe that'll become a little more real, and concrete, which is apparently the only thing that really moves Americans is, good concrete suffering.
Greed is good. It will save us from right
Yeah.
hate.
Well, fun. Yeah, good. I'm glad we did fascism. Maybe next time we do militarism.
Well,
About what happened.
I hope they all go home and we don't have anything to talk about.
That'd be great. If we maybe we'll have just a podcast like, isn't this great, man? All this democracy and good.
Because well, yeah, once you start digging in historically into that stuff, I mean, fascism is kind of down my wheelhouse of rhetoric, but militarism and military history and military takeovers, that's scary stuff, and I don't know that much about it, but except to
That
get
gets
ready.
very scary. Like I watched The Rise of Rome and the Fall of Rome on Great Courses, which is on Amazon, which you can get for like $6 a month. Just because I knew, in general, a bunch of stuff about Rome and Greece history with this stuff, but it was interesting to really lock it down. And you see, 200 years of the military killing every emperor that got into power, often within 6 months, in Rome, and just the
Well, that's where the
deterioration
Brotherhood
of
was
it,
bound, as it
and they
turns out.
became that became the system. Well, can you survive the military once you get into power?
Well, one of the more hopeful things I heard reported was that of the 72 or something like that, I'm sure I'll get all these numbers exactly right, but the spirit is right, of the report anyway, who had served, of National Guardsmen who had come up for reenlistment during the occupation, I think, of LA. Uh, Only like 20 had reenlisted, which is considerably, normally the reenlistment rate is like 60 some percent. And they interviewed these guys and they said, no, this is not what we're supposed to be doing here at all. So, where the military, where the boots on the ground really want to be, could be a determining factor.
Yeah, it's all brand new. That's what I was saying. Maybe next time we'll do a little militarism, the rhetoric of militarism and the realities of what that means. Again, America's never really done this to itself, so we'll see what happens.
That is true.
Well, thanks. Enjoy it from Nashville. When do you go to Italy, or not Italy, Portugal?
Going to Portugal
Right.
in October. Yeah.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll try to get back in here before you hit the European shores. Once again, thanks. Appreciate it.
Good to see you. Nice to chat, as always.
Always fun. There you go. Go out in there. Don't be fascist, y'all. Break the fascist chain. All right. See ya.